Hi there, it's Jeanette. I wanted to share this birthday card I created for my nephew. I used Lawn Fawn's Jossum set as well as the MERMAID set to create it. I used dies from My Favorite Things. These are their stitched squares. So I took the second largest one and I cut out some squares using aqua paper. And those are going to be the mats for my little card that I created. I also cut out some vellum with the same square. So I just cut out a couple of the vellum squares. And they're going to be sort of like the ocean waves on my card. So I'm going to take the ocean borders from Lawn Fawn and I'm going to line the two pieces of vellum up at a time, and then I'll just place these dies over top both of them. So a larger sort of die here that has larger waves and then one that has some smaller waves, and then I'll just die cut them all at once. So to create the card, what I did is I took some cardstock. I measured first the square size, and then I was able to determine that I needed to cut these at 3, and I cut them 3 by 6 and 3 by 9. And then I scored them. So the one that's 3 by 6 I scored at 3, and the other one I scored at 3 and 6. And then I just used my bone folder to make sure that the folds were nice and crisp. And then I'm going to put it together. I realized that there was a little piece sort of sticking out because of the way the cardstock butted up against each other. So I did trim that piece down a little bit just so that it wouldn't stick out. And then I'm going to take some adhesive and sort of adhere one to the other like this. And so you'll see that it'll open upwards and then sideways. And these are the mats that I'm going to be using. I decided to do a little bit of sponging just to give it a little bit of depth. So this is Distress Oxide Ink in Salty Ocean. And I just flipped my Score-Pal mat over because it has a nice shiny surface. And I used that to put my ink on. And I had to put like a piece of, I put an old envelope underneath the vellum because I couldn't really see the ink going on because it was sort of the same color as the mat. So this way I can sort of see the color that I'm putting on the vellum. So once everything was sort of inked up, I put adhesive on each piece and I'm just adhering it now to the card. So you can sort of see how that opens up. And I'm going to stamp out the images that I'm going to be using. I have some Neenah cardstock. It's actually a piece of leftover Neenah cardstock, and you can see that I wrote that little N on the corner. That's so that I know that it's actually Neenah and that I can use it with Copic markers, no problem. So I stamped out the shark a couple of times, and then this little fish. I guess 4 times I stamped it out. I wasn't sure how many I was going to use. And then I'm going to stamp the rock and the narwhal from the MERMAID set. And I'm going to now color those up. So I'm going to list the Copic marker numbers that I'm using on the screen as I'm using them, and just color up the images. And while I do that, I'll explain the card because you're probably wondering why there's a narwhal on the card. And it's just, I guess, basically a little bit of a joke. My nephew, for his last birthday, after he got his card, which he loves, he likes getting the cards, he actually collects them, and he has them sort of over his bed, which is really cute. But he said to me that for his next card, he wanted a narwhal on his card, which was totally random and it really made us laugh, but I remembered. So when I saw the Jossum set, I thought it'd be really funny to make a card like this where you can sort of see the shark creeping up as you move through the panels, and then as a surprise in the middle there would be a narwhal. Anyways, I just thought it was funny. The family thought it was very funny too. He thought it was cute. So that's sort of why there's a narwhal in the card. It's sort of a inside joke. So you can see that I'm just coloring everything up very quickly, just using a few markers. Using that gray marker over top the blue gives it a nice sort of cast, and I feel it looks more sort of realistic to their colors. I'm going to color the narwhal in the exact same way. And he's quite cute, I think. And now you can see I'm adding that gray. You can see how it just sort of gives a nice sort of layer of color on top of everything. I did sort of add a few dots while it was still wet, so they would be very, very light, but still be there. I'm going to color the rocks with the neutral grays as well. So I'm using darker tones of the neutral grays. And then for the goldfish, I'm using, I guess they're not really goldfish, they're in the ocean. But for these yellow fish, these are the colors I'm using. And again, very quickly colored them because they're so small. It doesn't take very much time at all to color them. I did go over them with my Copic multiliner just to darken up some of the eyes and some of the lines, just to make sure they were really, really well contrasted, I guess, against everything. So now I'm just going to place all my dies. The Jossum set, I hadn't used the set of dies yet, so I did have to clip them apart. And I do use sort of jewelry clippers, but I'll leave a link to something very similar to what I use. Here I just have sort of a paper towel. I like to sort of nip off the sort of extra pieces of metal, and I really don't like them flying about, so I usually sort of put them in my hand in a paper towel and clip them like that, so they sort of fall in the paper towel so they just don't fly everywhere. And I'm going to just take my Post-it tape here and I'm just going to sort of secure everything down so that it doesn't shift around when I am running it through my Big Shot, because after coloring everything you really don't want to ruin it by having the die shift and then not cut in the correct place. So while I was doing that, I realized I had forgotten to stamp out the two little fins that are also in the Jossum set. So I stamped and die cut them while I was die cutting the other things, and then I'm just quickly coloring them in because I do need those for the front of my card. And I'm just using the same colors I used for the sharks and the narwhal. So now it's just about sort of playing with everything and placing it so that it looks, looks nice. Everything sort of balances out on the card. For the vellum, because I cut it with those cross-stitched dies, it was actually really, really super easy to adhere the vellum to the mats. I just basically ran glue along the lines created by those cross stitches, and then just sort of ran my bone folder across them just to press it all together, and they ended up staying glued down really well, and you couldn't see any of the adhesive through the vellum. So I was really happy with how that turned out. So now I'm just making sure that the fin is going to move over a little bit so it's not in the same place, exact same place it was on the other panel. I'm going to go ahead and glue the third piece of vellum down now. Is it the third or the second? I'm not paying attention. I think it's the third. And then I'm going to have the full shark here. And then for the final panel, so when you finally open up the full card, I'm going to glue down the narwhal, the rock, and I'm going to have the shark there too, but I'm not going to have the whole shark. I'm going to end up cutting him so that you can only see, I guess, a portion of his tail. So here I'm just sort of figuring out where I need to cut him off. And so he's sort of behind the rock there. So he's still there, but he's not going to be the focal image anymore because I'm going to put the narwhal there. I did end up having to trim that a little bit more so it was nice and even and straight. And I wasn't sure where I was going to put him, but in the end I decided he had to sort of be inside those waves, so that's where he is. Press everything down. So I did end up closing it all up and putting a block on it to sort of be a weight so that everything would dry nicely. Now I'm putting some bubbles on the vellum, so I'm just using like an anti-static bag and then some Versamark and white embossing powder. And here's the finished card, the stills from the finished card. You can see that I put the little fish. You sort of see him appearing in different places on each panel. So that's my card. I hope you enjoyed it. I had so much fun making this for my nephew, so I'm so glad you could join me and watch. I have a full list of the supplies and links for these products below my video on YouTube, or you can go on my blog and check it out. Thanks so much for watching.